Hello, folks. Welcome to Between Awesome and Disaster. This is your host, Will Carey. I appreciate you being here. Hope wherever you are in this world, you're doing well, wearing a mask and taking care of those around you, as will be my refrain for the foreseeable future. Things have been going, have been clipping along steadily for me at this time. I will say, I've started on occasion renting city bikes in New York City, and to try to get some physical fitness. And also, when I lost the most weight and I ever had over a summer when I was in high school, it was through doing a lot of biking. I don't know if it's the heat, age, probably a little bit of both of those, um, or having to wear the or wearing a mask. But I was biking recently, and I got more physically exhausted than I can remember being. And I'd been doing this clip going from Astoria to Long Island City, relatively right on a pretty regular basis. But for some reason, like, my heart started beating incredibly fast. I got very hot. I was fine, but I have no idea why I was that particular run was so brutal compared to other ones times I've made it where it's been relatively still challenging, but not not to the point where I was like, why am I doing this? But that's something that's been going on as well. I will tell you this. I'm sure anybody listening to this who's a fan of stand up comedy already knows. But I recently attended an outdoor, socially distanced show in Long Island City at the Culture Lab. That had some real, like, heavy hitters in New York stand up on it, and the woman who closed out the show, Jessica Kirson. I'm sure if you know comedy, you probably know Jessica Kirson, but in case you don't, she's one of the funniest comedians you will ever see. She has a special out on Comedy Central called "Talking to Myself." If you haven't seen it, definitely say it. And she's never met me. I would love to have her on the show, but you might have heard her recently on Mark Maron's podcast. And it was my first time seeing her do a set live, and felt good, really good to laugh as hard as I did during her set and during that show. It was quite a good time. So definitely seek out Jessica Kirson's stand up if you haven't seen it yet. And if you have, then you already know. So that makes you hip and with it as well. Segue. Been watching a lot of Seth Meyers. That's kind of his go-to. Another performer I'm really excited to talk to on the show today, storyteller Marc Abbott. Mark I met doing Jake Hart's storytelling show, The Dump at the Creek in the Cave, in the before times, back when we did shows indoors and got on stage and talked into the same microphone. Crazy concept, I know. But Mark has this amazing story that we talk about pretty much right at the top, about working security for a Tupac concert when he was in university. And he has incredible stories, and he's he's a native New Yorker, and I like talking to native New Yorkers because I love the city. So we talk about a lot about storytelling, the craft of putting together a story and a one person show, as well as we trace Mark's path through the entertainment business into telling stories on stage. And he has done a lot of different things that I did not know about. So this is a wonderful conversation that I'm looking forward to sharing with you guys. And we'll get into it pretty soon as I try to keep these brief. But if you guys are just hearing this podcast for the first time, I want to thank you for taking a chance listening to me. I have I guess at this point, almost over 170 something episodes of this show for you to listen to kind of help you get through at least that many hours of quarantine and lockdown, wherever you happen to be in this bizarre point in the world. And we are available wherever you get your podcasts. And if you listen to this and enjoy it, I'd love to hear from you. You can hit me up on Twitter at Comic Will Carey. And let's get into it. Let's talk now. Let's talk to storyteller and a really great guy, Marc Abbott. All right, Marc Abbott. Thanks for doing this, man. I really appreciate your time.
No problem.
Um,
Great to be here.
Hey, good to have you, man. Like what I was thinking back before we got on in the before times back when like we did shows and got on stage indoors and stuff. Uh, of the people that I would see like at the dump at the creek in the cave, your story about doing security for that Tupac show like really sticks out to me of all the stuff I heard in that basement, man.
Hmm. That's a Yeah, that was an interesting time. That was a really interesting event, and oddly enough, I hear it pops up in the Tupac movie. I mean, I've never seen it, but they talk about that particular evening when he was in Atlanta.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I don't know if they go into depth about what actually happened at our school, but yeah, I it was one of those you had to be there kind of things to see it, and everybody that was there was in complete awe of that evening, and it's probably one of the most dangerous things I've ever done. I would think, in terms of, because I didn't do a lot of security. We did a lot of concert security when I was in college.
Mm-hmm.
There was a group of us that had gotten together, and our student government organization had put us together, and we were basically frontline for all of the big name acts. Partly because many of us knew not to be starstruck. We
Mm-hmm.
knew that when we were asked to do something, we went in professionally. I mean, we had someone who worked concerts, security for concerts, and he stepped in to train us a little bit and give us the teach us the ropes. But one of the things that you never know, you could plan for everything, and you never know what's going to happen. So in that instance, they when they told us that he was coming, at this point, this was at the height of his popularity.
Mm-hmm.
He was he was very well known for getting into scraps with people, and
Yeah.
kind of having that moniker of a thug, or he adopted that whole moniker.
Yeah, that kind of
And
street tough persona.
yeah, yeah, and it was funny because when they told me, they were like, well, you know what, we're going to put Mark in the green room, and partly because we're putting him there because he's the only person that we know that he's not going to let you know all of these artists get to him. I mean, I for my own sake, I do. There are people, or there were people that literally would have me gasping if I met them. But
Mm-hmm.
in this sense, it was just like, okay, I had to just mentally prepare because I had already, we read all the magazines and everything. And this particular night, the his crew showed up before he did. The entourage shows up, and nobody knows where he is. Where we have a gymnasium full of students. It's sweltering in there. They're literally watering people down with super soakers at
Uh-huh.
one point
Oh my
because that's
gosh.
how hot it got. And all we kept hearing was that he was on his way. He was on his way. His flight was delayed. Then there was something wrong with the car. But the whole time I'm in this room with pretty much his crew named Thug Life.
Uh-huh.
And at some point, someone had come in. We believe it was the security guards were going into the green room, and they would come up because I was outside the door. And the security guards would come, and they're like, "We got to check the room. We have to check the room." And I'm like, "All right, go ahead." And they go in. A couple of minutes later, they come out. They're like, "Everything's fine." But what I didn't know was that they were inside actually eating the food that we had put in there for Pac and his people.
Yeah, yeah.
So by the time his crew got there, there was nothing left.
Oh
These guys
no.
had pretty much eaten it all. So I'm at the door. These guys are inside there. They're wilding out. They're behaving for the most part. But at some point, one of them comes out and he's like, "Hey, man, we need some food." I'm like, what are you talking about? There's plenty of food in there. And he's like, "No, man, there's no food in here." So I go in and I look, and sure enough, all of the food is missing.
Yeah.
So, now I'm nervous because now you got a group of people who are tired. They're frustrated. Nobody knows where Tupac is. They're ready, to get things going. And now there's nothing to eat. And I'm the only person that stands between them and going downstairs and getting crazy. So at this point on the back end of this, what I don't know is that there's all kind of mayhem going on downstairs. So everybody's on edge because now you have a gymnasium full of people who now think he's not coming, or they bought tickets for a show and they're about to hear the famed announcement, sorry, ladies and gentlemen, but due to, unforeseen circumstances, so-and-so's not coming.
Yeah.
And then now you got a mob scene on your hand.
Yep.
So they're basically like, so what are we going to do? So I get on the radio. I said, listen, this is Mark in the green room. Go for Mark. And I'm like, listen, said, I'm up here with Thug Life and there's no food in the room. I said, so I'm going to need somebody to make a run and go get some food. And I look at these guys and I'm like, what do you guys want? So now they start giving me orders. They want chicken. They want this. They want that. So I'm like, I'm on the radio and I'm like, listen, can somebody run out to either Church's or Kentucky Fried Chicken or something, get at least 2 or 3 buckets of chicken or something and bring it over here? What they don't know downstairs is that I'm in the room with the crowd. So the person responding basically says, Mark, bottom line is you tell them motherfuckers they ain't getting nothing to eat. We're done. We're not serving nothing. And I said, well, I don't really need to even tell them that at this point because I'm standing in the middle of the room and they just heard you. And there's dead silence on the other end of the radio. And now I've got all of these people, like now the room is deathly quiet. Everybody's looking at me. And I'm like, so I was like, I don't know which one of you motherfucking downstairs need to go out and get something, but somebody needs to get these cats something to eat. And it needs to happen like ASAP. So in my mind, I'm thinking, as long as I make it sound urgent, they know that I'm still on their side. And eventually the food comes before Pac gets there. So when Pac shows up, I get a call, hey, listen, Pac is in the building, bring Thug Life down. So now I'm literally hoarding cats. I've got all these guys running out of the room. Everybody's excited. I'm like, hey, y'all got to calm down. Y'all need to do it. And one of the guys in the room's like, hey, listen to him. He's security. He's looking out for us. He tried to get us the food. Everybody calm down. Everybody calm down. Respect security. I'm like, oh, thank you. If everybody could just follow me, I'm like, I know gaps in between me and yourselves. Let's go. I need everybody moving as one unit. And as we get down to the back of the stage, one of the guys says to me, hey, man, we put a little something together for you. This is for you. And he hands me a bag. And I'm looking at this thing and I'm like, okay. And I didn't open it. I went back to my place in the green room, and the food has arrived. And now I'm still at the door until the concert is over and everybody's calling me downstairs. They're like, Mark, we need you downstairs. We need that extra hand. And I get downstairs, I help them out. I go back upstairs, and there in the room is there was an artist group called The Boys back in the day. And one of them, the lead singer, somehow, don't ask me how he got upstairs, but he was in the room, in the green room, eating the chicken. And I walk in and I'm like, wait a minute, where did you come from? I'm like, no, you gotta go. And people are like, do you know who that is? I'm like, I don't care who it is. He gotta go. I'm not. And so when we get downstairs, that's when the explanation comes about the whole thing about somebody was attempting there was an attempt on Pac's life. They had gotten word that somebody was trying to do something or was going to try to get into the concert and start something.
Yeah.
And finally I get a chance to look in this bag and I'm like, I was like, well, this was handed to me. And they're like, what is it? And I open it and it's weed. Like a nice big bag of weed.
Right.
And I'm like, well, I don't smoke this, but hey, and the head guy, he was like, yeah, I'll take care of that. Yeah, give me that. Don't worry about that. And I was like, yeah, I'm pretty sure you will. So that was an interesting night to be the backstage.
Oh my God.
Sure.
I can imagine. Like when you were telling that story, the analog for me was um, when there was a Metallica and Guns N' Roses concert where James Hetfield stepped into a firework and had to go to the hospital in the middle of the show, and then Guns N' Roses, Axl Rose pulled like a diva move and left the stage after like 2 songs, and then the entire crowd proceeded to just burn Montreal to the ground. Uh,
I remember that story. I remember that very well.
yeah,
Um, uh,
and
yeah,
then wrangling people like that, yeah, like high profile stars and everything that comes with that, yeah.
yeah. I mean, the interesting thing is that many of them are they're very subdued. Many of them are not the raucous, you know, lose your mind kind of people. You do run into some divas every once in a while. I worked in television and ran into a few of them, but for the most part, you know, they're really cool. They like to feel relaxed. You know, they're going out to
Sure.
perform. I think a lot of them just see it as, you know, this is what I do. I don't think of myself as being any kind of special. But I mean, think about it. You're standing out on the stage and there's 40,000 people screaming your name. You know, you gotta have a God complex at some point. You know, when something like that happens.
I would imagine so. You kind of get there's that kind of addictive rush that kind of comes from that sort of adoration. And I would imagine also, because that kind of makes sense to me. Because like there's the public persona, and just because we're talking about Tupac, there's his very public persona and his kind of like middle finger to the world sort of ethos that he kind of lived and then eventually died by. And then there's
Mm-hmm.
like the guy and the crew that are off stage. Like if people were if that was who they were like 24/7, there's no way that you could like run a business, because being a touring musician is a business. There's no way you could like
Mm-hmm.
sign contracts like there that
Yeah.
I think about that a lot. That sort of like that there's the entertainment version of who you are as an artist, and then there's like who you actually are as a person. And I always have tried to in my comedy career kind of make the two the same. I don't know if that's the correct way from like a how to get successful way, but that's kind of how I've always approached it. I'm not sure if this is something you think about it at all.
Well, you know, it's interesting. I don't know if you knew. Did I ever tell? Were you ever around for the Michael Jackson story?
Maybe, but what's that story?
Um, well, when I was in high school, my mother, well, our family was very good friends with Emmanuel Lewis, who
Mm-hmm.
played Webster on TV. And this was at the time when he and Michael Jackson were like all over the place. And when Michael came to do the Bad tour here in New York, he invited us back to the hotel where Michael was staying. At the time, we didn't know that's where we were going. We just knew we were going to go hang out with Emmanuel.
Yeah.
And we got a chance to actually meet Michael.
Oh
And
wow.
people always say, well, you know, what was that like? And I was like, you know, the funny thing is, he seems so happy to be around a family.
Mm-hmm.
Like he's not, he didn't, you know, for us, it's like, it's Michael Jackson. It's the greatest entertainer of all time.
Yeah, yeah.
And to him, it's literally like people. Oh, thank God, regular people, you
Right.
know. And you know, he did, you know, he took photos with us and he did the autograph thing, but he was calm, he was relaxed, he was laughing, you know, he took a picture with a smile on his face. You know, it you get the sense that this was like, I don't know what we thought he was supposed to be,
Mm-hmm.
but it was one of those moments where I was like, wow, this guy is really just like, he's he he looking at him, it's like, my God, it's the greatest guy, the greatest entertainer of all time. But then talking to him, it was like, wow, this is like the guy that lives down the street who might happen to sing on the weekends. He was just really, really down to earth.
Mm-hmm.
And you start to like, and then years later, as you go on in life, you see the crazy stories about him, and you see the behavior and everything,
Yeah.
and you wonder, did he do most of that just because the camera was on him, and he was like, well, this is what people expect of me, so I'm gonna go ahead and play this role, and that's who I am. But the person we met was a complete 360-degree, you know, there was nothing odd about him. There was nothing, I mean, getting close up to him, you could see where he had, done all the surgeries and stuff like that. You could make out, that he had work done.
Yeah.
But there was never a moment where we felt like, you know, I he would like go nuts or something like that, or we would see him do something that just didn't make any sense. And
Sure.
it kind of mirrors what people in his world would say. They're like, Michael was just Michael. We when I knew him, or we performed with him or did anything, he was professional. He was kind. You know, that was the persona he had. So, it is. I do think sometimes that I think people like the Hollywood version or the entertainment version of the person, because I guess there's a part of all of us that we invest so much in the performer,
Yeah,
that we want to
exactly.
believe that the performer is larger than anything that's in front of me right now.
Yeah.
He's,
Otherworldly.
yeah, yeah. And at the end of the day, when you, like you mentioned the Guns N' Roses thing, that's Axel throwing a temper tantrum. Like, who doesn't throw a temper tantrum when they don't get their way? It's not, and then people are like, oh wow, he's a diva. But,
Yeah.
you know, he I mean, we'll call him every name under the sun, but there was a reason why he got up and he did what he did. And I remember later on seeing an interview with what's his name, with Slash,
Yeah, the
and
guitars.
and Slash was like, he would do things like that, and we would get mad because we're like, it's a paid gig, man. They're paying us good money. We've come here to perform, and now you're costing us a paycheck because you don't you didn't get your way. It's like, there is a band behind you, right? It's like, we can't
Yeah,
be
you
the
got to
only
think
one
about other
standing out there
people.
without you. So
Yeah,
yeah,
exactly. It's really interesting to me. That kind of makes sense. It makes sense to me that maybe Michael Jackson would kind of crave that, because given that he has been like in cameras were on him for basically his entire life, and given like the abusive childhood that he was known to have, it kind of makes sense to me that he would crave that sort of, like, I imagine he would be just like very excited to like just sit down to a table and just have like a boring normal like Tuesday dinner with a family. Like, that kind of makes sense to me. The same way people think, oh, superstardom, that's going to fulfill all of my needs, like material wealth, financial security, etc., which he didn't have either.
hmm
But when people like crave what they've never had, like it sort of makes me like, the way I sort of like kind of shunned my hometown for a long time because it was like very rural and not an environment I wanted to like stay in. But now, having been in New York for 10 years, I can see its charms, despite the fact I still don't want to go back.
right. Mhm.
Um,
No, I get it.
yeah. So you went to college in Atlanta, but you're born and raised in New York, right?
Yeah, yeah. My whole life I've been here.
Okay. I think that might also play into why you would be good with concert security, because my fiance is born and raised in Brooklyn also, and she is terminally unimpressed by celebrities, famous people. Whereas I'm like, I'm sure she looks at me like those people you see outside on the Today Show, like, ah, because I have always aspired to be that, being from a small town. But what part of Brooklyn did you grow up in?
Well, I grew up in. It depends on who needed our votes. Let's put it that way.
Okay.
Technically, I grew up on the border of East New York and Canarsie. But
Right.
when somebody needed a vote, I was Canarsie. When they didn't need our votes, we were East New York. So, but I grew up. I grew up in a very quiet neighborhood. Really, I think the major action in my neighborhood was the high school, Tilden High School, which wasn't far from us,
Mm-hmm.
and that was back in the '70s and '80s. It had a horrible reputation. It was just,
Yeah.
it was one of those schools where just nothing but bad stuff always happened there. And
Sure.
and I grew up here, uh, doing normal, everything we normally would do in New York. We bicycle riding and playing ball in the street and things of that nature. It was, I liked it. I liked it. I liked getting away when I went to college. I really enjoyed being away from New York for the 4 years. And but it's always funny when you go away when you go away to school,
Mm-hmm.
and there's always this, man, I can't wait to get down there. I can't wait to get out of New York and everything. And then the first thing you do is you start looking for New Yorkers.
Sure.
It's like
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
start looking around and going, okay, we're all the people from New York, because I need somebody around me who understands, you know,
Mm-hmm.
my confusion and everything. And then you come back to New York during the break, and you're like, man, I can't wait to get out of this place. I'm tired of being here. You
Yeah,
know?
exactly. And Canarsie, this is the probably the least talked about borough, I think, in New York City. My idea of Canarsie is that it is once you get out at a certain point in Brooklyn, it starts to get a little bit more. I'm not going to say suburban, but a little less like major city like.
Yeah, the deeper into Brooklyn you go, the more you start to see it's more houses,
Mm-hmm.
it's more, backyards, they're townhouses. Uh, it's not as congested as, you know, uh, where I am now, where I'm in Prospect Heights.
Mm-hmm.
And even here in Prospect Heights, it really wasn't that congested until, we'll say, about maybe 20 years ago. I want to
Okay.
say almost, when Brooklyn started to become gentrified,
Sure.
and
Yep.
people wanted to live. Really, what it is that people want to live closer to Manhattan, which is why you don't really hear too much about people coming to Brooklyn and saying, "Oh, I got an apartment out in Canarsie, or I'm out in Mill Basin." Unless you have family out there, or somebody who lives out there and they just kind of hooked you up.
Mm-hmm.
They Most people want to live in the Slope, in the Heights, both Brooklyn and Prospect, and downtown Brooklyn, because I'm a stone throw away from Manhattan. And even downtown Brooklyn now, it's beginning to look a lot more like Manhattan than it is, you know, has the Brooklyn charm that I always say.
Yeah, I can. Yeah, that I'm hip to what you're saying there. I would say the same way about Long Island City near the creek and the cave. Like if you head down towards where the water is,
Yeah.
all those big apartment buildings that they're starting to build, they're kind of trying to turn it into West Palm Beach. Guess for all the New Yorkers that are like, I don't want to go down to Florida. I'm like, okay, well, go down to the edge of Queens, and we're like, well, okay. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, and then especially like something else I find so if you're in New York through like if you're in like New York in like the 70s and 80s, which is I've always thought of as kind of like the gritty time for New York, and then moving into like the Giuliani 90s and then early 2000s. I've always imagined like something I like to tease my fiance about is like, well, New York City, yes, greatest city in the world, but where I'm from, we know that waterfront property is valuable. I don't know why you pushed everyone out to the edges of Manhattan.
um, it's funny because a lot of waterfront property here in New York was industrial.
Right, exactly.
The Dumbo area, even as you're going into Williamsburg, there was one of the large, we had a large Domino's sugar factory.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And they closed that down some years ago. I want to say it's been over a decade since they closed it down. And as soon as they shuttered its doors, the announcement went out, oh, we're making luxury housing along the waterfront. And I mean, it's Manhattan is beautiful. It's a beautiful city to look at. I don't know if I need to spend $4,200 a month to look at it, or just because I'm living near the water.
Right.
And I'm probably being generous with the 4,200. It's probably more than that. But
well, given the pandemic, I feel like we're going to see a drop in real estate prices soon.
Yeah, I have a funny feeling that's going to happen, along with a couple of, and that was my whole thing about the neighborhood I'm in. Brownstones were going 2.5, 3, $4 million. And I would always tell people, I'm like, it's interesting. I wonder what's going to happen when we turn that corner and people want to leave. Nobody's going to buy your $3.5 million brownstone for $3.5 million. People are, your leaving means there's a problem, which means I don't see the value of paying you that kind of money. With everybody, particularly with now, most people are fleeing to go further into the state of New York.
Yeah.
So it's going to be interesting to see exactly what happens when people start leaving and emptying out all of these quote unquote luxury condos and stuff like that, because the bottom line is the people with the money who are leaving behind the people who are struggling. And if you can barely make rent for $2,000 a month, you're really not trying to pay $5,000 for, to overlook the borough so that you can see the buildings in Manhattan. So it'll be interesting to see what happens to the market as people flee and go other places now.
Yeah, it's going to be it's going to be very interesting to see what happens. I've decided. My fiance and I are determined we're going to ride this out. The only way we would ever leave New York is if we were leaving America. So I'm very curious to see what happens. And did you like? Were you like a creative kid growing up? Was there like music or entertainment in the house? I'm trying to trace how we get you to being a performer.
Yeah, there was. Well, my dad. I credit both my parents, but I credit my father more. My father was one of those people. He loved books. He loved music. He loved movies. He got me into anything that had to do with entertainment. I got it from him.
Awesome.
Growing up, movies were our thing. We would go to the movie. There was a movie theater not too far from the house. There was one at the mall at Kings Plaza. And then there was one in a little shopping area called Georgetown. And on Saturdays, if it was a PG movie, he would take me. It didn't matter what it was. We would always go to see some kind of movie.
Yeah.
Unless it was something I desperately wanted to see, and he went out of his way. I remember vividly when he took me actually into the city to see Star Wars when I was a kid.
Oh, awesome.
And that was just a complete mind-blowing experience. And I think we saw it. Well, we saw the first two together. He didn't see the third one. I think he was kind of like, I'm all Star Wars out at this point. But he got me into the Twilight Zone. He got me into horror films and Broadway. He loved Broadway. He loved music. He played piano when he was a kid and saxophone. And at one point he tried to get me involved in instruments, and it didn't take. I did end up going to LaGuardia Music and Art for voice. So I was at that time I thought I was going to be a singer. I actually wanted to pursue a career. And I always tell people it was after meeting Michael Jackson that I got thrown after that, because I was like, man, I don't want to live like this where I can't even go out into the street to get a hamburger because the entire world is going to mob me, But I mean, I was a teenager then. But it left a huge impression on me. Um,
Oh yeah, I could absolutely see that. I've thought that way about like even reaching like the top of show business and like seeing like so many high profile examples of the steep decline. Sometimes it's for people's own ill ill
yeah,
behavior,
yeah,
but I kind of know exactly what you mean. As I've gotten older, I've kind of found the value in uh, in the cult level of success, I guess.
yeah, yeah. I
So
mean,
you're going to be
and
a singer.
yeah, I did some singing in high school, and when I went to college, I decided I wanted to be a filmmaker.
Okay.
I Because I loved movies so much, but underscoring all of that was my first love, which was writing. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
I loved to write ever since I was in the second grade. That's the one thing that I would get in trouble for in class. I would have open school night would come, and my teachers would, he's a good kid, he's smart, he can get his work done. But the problem is, Norman Mailer over here, instead of paying attention in class, he's writing not. And my father's like, what? And they would give my father composition notebooks, and they're like, this is what your son is doing, instead of paying attention. And my parents were very strict about education. Education was very important to them.
Right.
So me, it was recognized that it's not that I couldn't do the work. It's just that my mind, certain things just became boring to me, hearing the
Yep.
same stuff over and over again. And my mind would drift, and my hand is like, look, we got to write this down. And that had always been kind of on the back burner. I had always, my second thing was, if I wasn't going to do music, I definitely wanted to be a novelist. That's something I wanted to do.
Mm-hmm.
And by the time I got to college, it had changed to film because at the time Spike Lee was a huge deal. John Singleton was making waves in Hollywood,
Yep.
and nobody really pushed for creative writing. I took a creative writing class, which the teacher of that class, I remember, he was extremely impressed by my work. And but there was just no other outlet for it. There was so when I got out of school, that's what I thought I would do. And then I jumped around from film sets to TV sets, and I stayed stuck in the PA position for years.
Yeah.
But I kept writing. I always was writing something. And by the time the mid 90s came around, mid to late 90s, I was actually penning scripts for stage.
Mm-hmm.
And I would get friends together and rent out black box theaters in the city and do performances. I write these plays and put them on. And, so I figured, well, maybe I actually thought by being a novelist and a playwright, that could lead me back toward the screenwriting and into film, because if you can write for many different mediums,
Yeah.
eventually they'll pick you up for film.
Yeah, that kind of makes sense to me because when you really break it down, like everything that we do, and even before the idea of like the long form storytelling show becomes a thing, it really all comes down to the foundation of all storytelling. Once you get past like gathering around the fire at night, is writing, is the seed of every idea is like pen and pencil and an idea.
Yeah.
So that's kind of sounds like the undercurrent that's kind of all the way through, and so you go to college in Atlanta, filmmaking. You decide you're gonna be a filmmaker, and so Spike Lee was early on for you. I love him.
Yeah,
He's spectacular.
his work was absolutely phenomenal. And the other part was that I didn't see a lot of African Americans making movies. That
Right.
was that. And so seeing that, I was like, well, if he could do it, I could do it. Not in the sense of, oh, it's easy. It it literally was, well, there's a way through the door. If he can get through the door, then the rest of us can do the same thing.
Right. It's
And
possible.
but with everything with anything, and particularly in the arts, there is a lot of things that people just don't teach you. They don't tell you about. A lot of it is experience.
Mm-hmm.
You don't realize the hurdles you have to get past. And even when you hear the people who have made it constantly saying, oh, we need more people doing this, we need to see more people doing that, you trying to get through, I guess it's almost like, oh, I need to just say it so it can be said. Because oftentimes you run into those very same people and you're like, hey, I got this script and I would love, yeah, kid, that's nice. Yeah, not here. I'm not doing this here. And you get brushed off. And it happened to me a couple of times with some profile people but I just kept at it. And eventually I realized I spent 2 years on Law and Order. I could not get past it. It just got to the point where 2 years on Law and Order, and I wanted to be a writer's assistant, and they gave the job to someone who happened to be Dick Wolf, the creator of the show. This guy, his father was Dick Wolf's frat brother.
Yeah.
And they gave him the job that I was told they don't hire people for.
Right. Such a familiar story.
And then I was subsequently let go. So it was one of those things where it was like, well, I'm going to have to tackle this from a completely different angle. Apparently I can't go through the door. I'm going to have to figure out how to bust a hole in the wall and come up from behind everybody and just startle them.
Exactly.
So,
let me get my axe and do a shining. Yeah, that's so fucked up, dude. I'm so sorry that happened to you. But at the same way, that is a really important lesson. Not unlike when you're doing, because to me it's all it's a very punk rock thing. Like you're writing plays, getting your own space, friends, figuring it out, and doing the thing, and then I feel like it seems like so many people have this like moment of like somebody telling you no, and then this is your moment where I'm saying, well, fuck yourself, Dick Wolf. I'm gonna do it my way. So you're let go from Law and Order, and then are you performing on stage at this time, or does that come later? What happens after Law and Order?
So Law and Order, then I started getting into my plays. That's when I started doing the plays, and I was just writing. And I did perform in a couple of them only because it was really hard to keep actors. It wasn't a fact of, because I would always pay my actors. So it was never that people were working for me for free, but it was the role that I had created for one of my shows. I guess people felt it wasn't a big enough role, so it's not worth my time. And I got so tired of having to replace this one character that I was like, you know what? I'll just do it. I know it's a very simple character. It doesn't require a whole lot. And that's how I ended up in my own shows, not for any vanity reason.
Necessity.
But it came out of necessity. And then I went back. I completely decided after that, I was like, I don't want to be on stage. I really want to be behind the scenes. And I did another play. It was moderately successful. I got slammed by a critic, which I looked at it from the critic hated the work, and panned me and everything. And the cast, for their part, they read the article and they were upset about it. And I was like, well, here's the thing. I have to look at it from this angle. If the person feels that strongly about what I've written, that means I did my job. Because you can't be that angry at something unless it hit a nerve somewhere, which I think is what happened. I think it brought back some memory of something. And because if you had read it, it didn't say it sounded more, I wouldn't say it was a personal attack, but it was just it seemed to be searching for something wrong with the show rather than the story itself. They were, you know,
Yeah.
it was like, so
You just kind of read it and you're like, this is clearly about something else.
yeah, there's something else there. And so then I went back to trying to do my books again. And I went on a retreat, went on a writing retreat,
Mm-hmm.
and got talked into being in a writing competition that these people were having. Now, I should also mention that I started self-publishing. I started my own self-publishing label
Mm-hmm.
and was going completely broke because, you know, as a self-published author,
Taking on
you're
all the expenses.
taking on all of the expenses. So book fairs and trying to get, using social media to try to get the word out.
Yep.
And basically it literally was a culmination of a different things. The first thing started with a very, very horrible review I got for one of my books, because one of the things as a self-pub, when you're starting out and you don't know these things, the editor of one of my books did not do their job. I was under the assumption, and I've talked to other published authors, self-published authors, we made the same mistake. We get the work back, we look over it, we make the few corrections, and then we think the book is ready to print, when in fact we really need to go in and cover everything, and that was on my fault. But the person wrote like literally almost all they needed to say was, this guy should not be writing anything ever again, kind of thing. Then I got into the competition with the writers piece,
Mm-hmm.
and came in third. Although I was led to believe that, I was going to, kind of come in a higher margin. But part of what was supposed to happen with that was it was a publishing deal that went along with it. And I got beat, and those things happen. And then it was a tax situation where I couldn't get somebody to do the taxes for my self-publishing company. And finally, when I did, basically the IRS was like, you owe us $20,000. And I was like, what? No. and then I had somebody else take a look at the taxes, and they were like, you don't owe them $20,000. You owe them $700. And then he was like, listen, shut the company down. And I'm like, so, I did no, I can't do that. You don't understand how much. And he was like, look, you're hemorrhaging money. You're not making any, you're spending more than you're taking in. He's like, look, take the loss. It happens. Don't take it personally. These things happen.
Yeah.
You did what you thought you needed to do, but it's time to put this to bed. So a culmination of all of this stuff sent me into a form of depression. And to the point where there was a couple of days I couldn't go to work. I was just like kind of laid up for days I was just beating myself. Yeah. And I finally, one evening, I go into my local bar, and I'm sitting there, and these people come in. The bar had two sides. It was the bar, and then there was a performance space. Mm-hmm. And all these people come into the performance space, and they pull the curtain, and I'm sitting at the bar, and I said to the bartender, I was like, what is that? I said, the last time I was here, all these people showed up. I said, what is that, a private event? And he goes, no, it's a storytelling show. And I said, a what? And he said, a storytelling show. And I'm like,
what's that?
Like people get up and tell stories? So he's like, yeah. So I said, well, is it a private group, or is it something? He goes, no. They just pulled the curtain so they don't get the noise from the bar. So I go behind the curtain and I'm watching these people, and the curators, it was Susan Kent and Victoria Scroggins, who were doing Tell It Brooklyn. And I asked them, I said, what is this? And they're like, oh, you just put your name on the paper, and we pull your name out. You get 7 minutes to tell any true story. I'm like something that happened in my life. She said, yeah, any true story you want to tell. So I was like, okay. So I tossed my name in the bucket. And before I even could get back to get my beer, my name is called. And I went up and I told my first story about an incident that happened in college.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like I got bit. It was like the bug bit me.
Yep.
And
I know it well.
every month, they were like, we're here every month. So I started every month. I was there, putting my name in the bucket. And finally, we got to the point where they moved. They moved from the bar. They started moving around to different places, and I was following them.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like a religion for me. Like it was like, you know, I go to work, I come home, I must do storytelling on Wednesday nights. That's my thing.
Yeah.
And finally, Susan said to me, she said, you know, you really need to go to other shows because this seems to be the only place you need to, because you're really good, and you should go out and do other shows. And I did. And then finally, Susan said to me, she goes, okay, enough of this. We need to get you at the Moth. And I told her, I said, I'm not doing the Moth. She goes, why not? I was like, I'm not doing a storytelling competition. That's another animal. And she was like, no. We got to get you at the Moth. And that's what we did. We went to the Moth at down on
Bell House?
No, not the Bell House. It was in Manhattan.
So, it was in Manhattan. Okay.
Workhouse. I forget. I can't remember the name of it.
Okay.
It was on, but it was like near Prince Street.
Okay.
And
Housing Works, maybe.
Yes, that's it. We went to Housing Works.
Okay.
And all these people put their name in, and they're pulling names. And I turned to Susan. I was like, this is a waste of time. They're not going to call me. And we get close to the break, and Dan Kennedy is like, well, when we get back from the break, the first person up is Marc Abbott. So I get up there, and I tell this story about an incident when I was a kid and this bicycle that I built and tried to jump this ramp. Mm-hmm. And everything went south trying to pull this stunt off to impress a girl. And I win. So Susan is like over the moon about this, and I'm in shock.
Yeah.
And so they give me I think this was the first time they were doing this. They were giving certificates out for Storyteller for the Moth, and I got the certificate. And Dan says to me, he goes, "So we'll be in touch about the Grand Slam." And I'm like, yeah. I'm sorry, the what? And he goes, yeah, no, this isn't it. You know, there's one more after this. And I'm like, wait, there's more to this? I've got to. So I now am like, okay, this ought to be interesting. I didn't realize it was a Grand Slam. And 2015, it's November, we get the call about the Grand Slam. It's in Williamsburg. And we go. I perform, and I'm sitting there, and my wife is sitting next to me, and she's looking like the last storyteller gets up and everything. And most of the people on stage, I knew these were people I was familiar with.
Right.
And there's this part of my brain that's like, you know, after I finished, I was like, yeah, that was good, you know, but, and my marks were high. And I was like, I think I got this, but, you know, anything can happen.
Mm-hmm.
And we get to the last storyteller, and my wife is looking at the scoreboard, and she looks over at me and she goes, "You're going to tie." I was like, "What?" She goes, "Yeah, it's between you and this one other person up there." And I was like, "You're kidding." And she said, "No, you won this." And Dan Kennedy comes out, and he's doing his thing, and he goes, "Well, this is a first." He goes, we have two winners. And one of them was me. And
that's awesome, dude.
From that moment, I'm, you know, Susan is in the crowd screaming, and she's like, I can't believe. And it was one of those things where, I don't know. It wasn't something that I rested on laurels about. It's not something, and that there was part of me was extremely humbled that I won. And I
Mm-hmm.
never really, I think when I started doing my own show, when I decided to curate my own show, I had asked other storytellers, I said, do you think it's offensive if I put, or presumptuous, if I put on my flyer hosted by Moth Grand Slam winner? And everybody's like, no, why would you think? And I was like, well, I don't want people to think that I'm full of myself. It's just, you know, it's not something I want to use as to say, haha, I'm better than you, and, come do my show kind
Right.
of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I used it for a while and then I took it off, and, it just kind of, let the show do what it does. And yeah, well, I think we did our last show February, and then COVID hit, and
Yeah.
that was it. It was I don't even know if the place that was hosting me will even survive this when all of this is over, for me to go back.
Yeah, I know. And so when did that Grand Slam win happen?
That was 2015.
That's 2015. So this is all. I mean, it's 2020 now. So the on stage. This is all relatively recently, compared to your time in the trenches of television and self publishing, and then to
Yeah.
have this. I love that story, Mark. Just because it's kind of one of those like kind of like magical things that you just discover completely and then are great at, and just kind of seemingly at at random almost, because it's just that show happened to be happening in that moment, and then to think if that show was happening at some other bar. I love stuff like that. And yeah, Susan's spectacular.
Yeah, she
She
is.
I remember she booked my like maybe one of my early runs doing my one man show at a festival that was going on in Williamsburg. I wanted to ask you, do you think there's a certain style of storytelling that the Moth does that is different from the way other storytelling shows occur in this space? I've often made the joke, and when I'm doing a Moth story, that I kind of spread my hands out and always end with "and in that moment." So I'm curious if there is a certain style of Moth storytelling to you.
I it's funny because I've always at one point looked at storytelling. We all tell stories. I always tell people this. We all tell stories. We all have a unique way of telling stories. I often think about when you have a favorite family member who comes in from the holidays and they're like, oh, Uncle so and so is about to tell the story about, and everybody goes running because of the style and the way they tell it.
Yeah.
I think that mentally, because this was, I'll preface it this way: the night of the Grand Slam, um, everybody, majority of the storytellers were backstage rehearsing their stories.
Mm-hmm.
And my wife asked me, she goes, "You're not going to rehearse?" I said, "I don't have to. I know it." I said, I don't see the point of going over it because I'm comfortable. I know the story. I think what happens is a lot of shows have a particular, I don't want to call it a style, but there's a formula that works
Mm-hmm.
for the way that show is designed. And if you can follow the formula, you'll be okay.
Mm-hmm.
I never looked at the Moth because I did take the stage on the Moth one more time after that, at the Bell House, and I remember going up there and telling this story, and there was a point in the story where I was in a fight. I was somewhere I wasn't supposed to be. I got into a fight. I got injured, and I had to go home, and I had to tell this lie. And I'm telling the story, and I was like, so I go in the house, and this is what I said. And the audience starts laughing before I could even say it, because I got the feeling they were just like, oh, I've been here before. I
Yeah.
know exactly you're about to spew some bullshit that's probably going to be the greatest thing you ever say in your life. And I started laughing, and which normally in the mob I guess there's a part of you that you feel you must take it seriously.
Yeah, I feel like the moth, there's an air of, exactly, that air of seriousness.
That and it really, I guess, if you follow that formula, if you just follow the formula, but you tell the story the way you would tell the story, you'll be fine. I think a lot of times what some people get so wrapped up in doing is they're worried about following formula or getting the formula right. Like it's a certain way I have to do this.
Right.
But really, it's really about the time. You have 5 minutes to tell a story you probably told someplace else for 7 to 9 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
And so mentally, what you're trying to do is you're trying to shave down your story, um, before while you're up there and you're telling it. I've often found that people have done wondrous things. The other storytellers who I know very well who've gotten up there and told their stories, um, have, with their own charm, followed the formula and they got it good. I have been there. One night I was there where there was a girl who got up and won the moth. And there was a part of me that was like, you shouldn't have won it, because it sounded like a monologue from a play. I was like, it was so over rehearsed.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't natural. You could tell she was trying to remember every single solitary line of the story, and it didn't feel genuine. And
Yeah.
so even on the way out, I could hear people saying, they were like, that just sounded way too rehearsed for it to almost to the point where people are like, I wonder if that's the real story, or did she make that up, because it just sounded way too rehearsed. So I guess with anything, I guess it's the prestige of performing under that moniker. But
Mm-hmm.
if you can just if you follow a formula, I mean, the risk is the same way. Risk um risk has a formula to it.
Yeah, I'm in the
And
middle of a pitch for Risk I've been working on for a while, and I've got to do another version of, so that it can kind of fit in with that, with what they're looking for. Totally.
because I know the first time I pitched the Risk, they were like, yeah, no. It was one of those, wait, what? I was like, this story kills. Everybody loves this story. But what I later learned was it wasn't the pitch itself, it was how I pitched it. And so it was sort of like, it didn't really move us. And so the next time I ended up doing a story for them, I just, it's like I threw spaghetti to the wall and let it all try to stick. And they loved it. They loved, what I did. But again, it's a formula. It's not, and it's nothing. It's nothing. I always say, don't get caught up in the formula. Just
Mm-hmm.
tell the story, but kind of adhere to what they're looking for. If they want you to, if they want more out of you when you tell the story, give them more. It's nothing wrong with it. It's but you know don't get yourself too bogged in the corner worrying about whether or not you're going to hit the mark or not, because
Yeah.
we're all. Mhm.
Yeah. I agree with that. I always go by like and I do this with stand up also. I go by like a 70-30 kind of for plan versus allow for spontaneity. Because otherwise you kind of sound like you're doing a monologue. And I've always found like, um, I think a comparison I've kind of made is like classical music versus like rock and roll. Like classical music, like when it's very well rehearsed, it is spectacular to hear and it's very powerful. But there's something kind of more emotionally exciting and dangerous about kind of sloppy, slightly out of tune rock and roll and shouting.
Right.
Because it kind of is a little bit more chaotic and raw. So giving yourself the freedom to have those moments, I think, is important. Which, again, like you were saying, it comes from after you've been on stage a lot, it just kind of naturally happens. Something I wanted to ask before we get out here is you've done 2 one-man shows.
Yes.
So I've been working on mine for a while, and it's changed titles a couple times, and I think I'm honing in on it being about something. It was, I originally thought it was about something else, but over time I'm realizing it is not. It might not be about that. It might be about something else entirely. I'm curious if when you were working on your shows, did you have any moments like that where you thought you were heading towards one thing and then you realized it was about something else entirely?
Oh yeah. The second show more than the first one. The first one-man show I did was a culmination of many different stories I had told around the storytelling community, and I found a common thread to sew them together. The second show, there was a lot in there. There was a lot more in there until I started editing it down, and then realizing that it wasn't what I thought it was going to be. My second show was really about relationships, and these different relationships that kind of changed my outlook. The girlfriend, the friend with benefits, the woman I would end up marrying, and then eventually, being a father. But originally the story was more like it almost read like a complaint, because I had put too many things in there. And at some point I looked at it and I was like, I don't need to, this has nothing to do with where I'm going. And I don't need to mention this person and this person, who cares? And I kind of once I started to whittle it down a little better, it became very clear what direction it needed to go in, like where it needed to wrap up.
Right.
So
fascinating. Well, because I think originally when I first conceived my show, it was kind of a series of, the overall theme was like me describing all of these kind of sad situations, but I have jokes along the way, so that's coping. But really, I now think I'm more interested in examining within those same stories why it is I interact with the world the way I do, and how that is now at a point now that I am no longer in the living the way I was in those stories, that I'm now fundamentally flawed for happiness.
Sounds interesting.
If that makes sense.
No, it makes perfect sense. I like that. That's great.
Yeah. Eventually, Mark, if we've got to tour, like if we've got to do tours of parks and fields for the next couple of years to get it all figured out, I might that might be the way that show business is for a little while.
Yeah, it might I remember they used to do this. I don't even know if they did it anymore. They used to do Shakespeare in the Park. At NYU, the park over there. I always forget the name of it, but one with the arch in it.
Washington Square Park, yeah.
Washington Square Park. People would do these Shakespeare where they just run through the park and start performing, like a Midsummer's Night's Dream. And then the audience, like a golf tournament, the audience is following them across the park as they perform. We may end up having to do that with storytelling. where it's you're at the band shell and it's like, oh, Will is over there in the field, you need to get over there and hear him.
Yeah, and
Like,
then
oh no,
and yeah, exactly. And then I direct everybody over to the other side of the park, and that's where you are. And then David Lawson, he's like in the fountain, and then and then and then Jake is like just throwing birds. Jake Hart's throwing bird seed at people. I think this is a great idea. My other thing I was just thinking of right now is, um, I've never experienced this as myself, but I hear about these like big tent like revivals that happen in the South, where like some
oh
big
yeah, church
preacher,
revivals.
yeah, like something like that, like a socially distanced comedy church revival, I feel like is not too far off.
I could see, you know what, just to get out of the house, I could see that becoming like a big thing. You're like, where are you going? I don't know, but there's a tent and there are people and there's a story or a comedy thing going, and I'm just going because I got to get out of the house and I got to be, where there's a show or something going on.
It,
I
it,
could see people coming to that.
oh yeah, I think so. I think like I've talked to some people who are maybe a little bit, there's a little bit more pessimism about the future of like the music industry. I've talked to some bands and such. But I do think there's going to be a silver lining where there will be some people that are like, I don't care what it is, I just need to go to something. I'll wear a mask,
Mm-hmm.
I'll stay away from people. I
Yeah.
just need to do something.
Yeah, I think, the thing is that, I've done a couple of online shows,
Me
and
too.
they've been fun. They've been absolutely fun. It was great doing Q&As after a few of them. Uh, but it's not the same for both the performer and the audience. It's not the same not being in the room, not feeding off the energy of each other. When people laugh at something that you definitely didn't try to make funny, but they see a whole ton of humor in it, there's something about that, and I think eventually we'll get back to it. It's going to take a while. I don't think we'll be dead in the water for ages, but I think by the time we get out of this and we're back to being around each other and being in halls and being out to support these kind of things, it'll be a welcome relief. I think for all of us, for those of us who take the stage, and for those of us who sit back and enjoy. I mean, I haven't done my. Somebody had asked me a couple of weeks ago, how come you don't do your show online? And I was like, it's like wrangling cats, man. I'm like trying to do all of that
Yep.
and get a Zoom chat going and doing, and I was like, it's really, I don't know if that's the thing. I just really enjoy uh, being in the room and in the moment. And it's also given me an opportunity to rethink and retool the show itself, because
Yeah.
how I had it going before, I've completely revamped the idea in my head, and I'm very eager to see if what I want to do works, which basically will be, I want to tailor my storytelling show where I have 6 performers, 3 veterans, and 3 people who either took a class in storytelling or this is their first time, and they get to share the stage with people who've been up there before.
That's a really interesting idea. It's very
And
democratic. I like this.
and so, because I know a lot of times when I've taken the stage with people who this is the or who have gone before me, and then I get up and I perform, and they're like, "Oh my God, you're amazing!" And how do you do that with not getting nervous and everything? And I'm like, well, I mean, because we've done it for so long, it's like second nature. And I know there's so many people that want to take the stage, but they're afraid, or they're saying, the people, I don't want to get on stage because I've heard so and so, and that's intimidating. But it's storytelling. It's a wonderful medium, and if and I also know that there are a lot of people who take the storytelling classes and stuff. Then they're running around looking. for a storytelling show to go to. They're like, where should I go? Should I go to the Moths? Should I try my hand at this? Does anybody know? And I would like to be able to say, hey, look, I will book you on my show, and you come on, and we'll have, I'll have Bill, I'll have me, I'll have Jake, and and then I get 3 other people who've never even taken the stage before. This is their first time, and mix and match it. Let them start it off, and we close it out, or we start it off and let them close it out and get the feel, like get their feet wet, and I think that's important for storytellers of any age who are just starting to do this, because it's a lot of fun when you do it, and sometimes all people need is just an opportunity.
Absolutely, I agree with that 100%. I'm glad that you're planning on providing that. That's one of the generosity of spirit and stage time is something I like about you, Mark. I think that this has been great. I can't wait for that show to happen. Is there anything else we can plug before we get out here?
There's really nothing else coming up. I will say I do a weekly podcast called Beef, Wine, and Shenanigans, which has nothing to do with food.
Uh-huh.
It's a podcast. Myself and 2 other authors, Stephen Van Patten and Kirk Johnson. We do this. It's Black Geeks, and we talk everything from geekdom to politics every week. And you can find us on SoundCloud. And I think that's. I'm steady working on some new material. Excellent. And hopefully later on this year I will have a couple of books out. Those are still in the works. So.
Oh well, fantastic. Well, definitely let me know when we got a release date. And that sounds like a really cool podcast. Podcasting for me right now has kind of helped me keep my mind right, given that the fact that every time I look outside my window, it's just hordes of locusts and everything's on fire. So that sounds really great. And I've really enjoyed this, Mark. You're always you're one of my favorite. I'm always excited when I get to see you on stage. And I was really happy that you did that show I did at the Sidewalk Cafe a little while ago. So thanks for your time, man. This has been spectacular.
Thank you. I've enjoyed this.
Likewise. All right. Look forward to sharing the stage with you in the after times, sir.
Sure, definitely.
If there's one thing that I took away from that conversation, and I hope anybody listening to this does as well, is that if there is something creative that you want to do, you do not need anybody's permission in order to do it. If you can you can educate yourself through sources on the internet. You can ask questions of people, and you can build your own foundation and way through this industry. And there are numerous examples of that. And like this Bill Watterson quote, I think if you build your own path, you'll ultimately be a lot happier in the long run. I'm paraphrasing it, but that quote is out there. And that's what I took from my chat with Marc Abbott. Very creative guy, and a guy I look forward to sharing the stage with soon, even if we have to perform in fields for the foreseeable future. So thank you guys for listening. That is our show for today. If you enjoyed this and feel like you know someone else who might be interested in this podcast, we are available everywhere you get your podcasts, including the big ones, Apple, Stitcher, and Spotify. If you'd like to get a free month of Stitcher Premium, you can sign up at stitcher.com/premium with the promo code AWESOME. that gets you 1 free month off of your Stitcher Premium subscription, and it helps support the show as well. So I thank you for that. And I also want to give a shout out to my supporter on Patreon, Mary Beth Mooney at the awesome producer level. Thank you so much for your support. I sincerely appreciate it. And if you guys are curious about what I've got going on over on Patreon, you can go to patreon.com/awesomedisaster. Check out some of the things that I've got available over there for you, including you can hear my music EP for my upcoming solo project that I put out. You can hear it all there now. So thank you guys again for your support and for your listenership. As I say every week, this show helps keep me connected. So thanks for being here for that. And I will see you guys next time between Awesome and Disaster. Stay safe and wear a mask, everybody.